Live. All right, gang, welcome back. We are on the soapbox and had been on the road the last couple ones, so here we are in the basement, the office, the lair, if we will. For those of you guys watching on YouTube, you can see that. All right, it's been a good week, busy week. It's and had some really good some questions, some feedback. Some members that follow the hand plan and a few other things about programming. So, and obviously last week we chatted about variance. So we'll kind of keep it going here. But I do think that this will also offer a broader insight, at the very least discussion, thought starter on how to handle feedback. So what I want to talk about is how we have a tendency to, certainly nowadays, it's to really take feedback and think about, all right, I'm receiving this feedback, and take it right away to I'm doing something wrong, as opposed to listening to the feedback and then not necessarily changing something right away, but at least taking action. So action and change are different things, right? But showing action is very important. Any feedback that you get is something that is important to listen to, at the very least, right? And and I think that that's something that is confused with change. It's like, oh, hey, here's some feedback. If I don't see change, I'm going to leave. And I think in this culture nowadays, sometimes that is dangerous. That's not what we're talking about. What I'm really talking about here is the feedback that you get. Does it make you to maybe look back, to internalize, to see what you're getting? There's a lot of things that you can do, but maybe no change is needed. Because, again, feedback from one person may not be something that is going to validate a massive change. This kind of goes back to like the 80-20 rule. 80% of your problems come from 20% of your people. You could even whittle that down to a much smaller split to like potentially 90% of your problems come from 10% or 95 and 5, right? Cool book if you want to dive into like the 80-20 rule. It's just a basic concept which makes a lot of sense, certainly in the service industry. But let's talk about how we talk about specific to programming. Programming is an area where we get feedback a lot on as gym owners and affiliate owners and coaches and within the CrossFit world. And, it's a full market. I mean, not only do I own gyms, not only do I run gyms and coach, but I also program with my fellow comrades at the hand plan. So we get a lot of feedback, which is really good. Not only that, I coach seminars, so you get feedback on all types of things, certainly related to programming. And here, keep this in mind. I think it's important because programming, and I want to gear this discussion towards coaches and affiliate owners. Programming is the lowest hanging fruit to give feedback on, because it is what people are doing. It's what they believe is the product, right? So if no matter what, you will always get feedback first on the programming first. And sometimes it truly is feedback on the programming. Sometimes it's just the low-hanging fruit for them to discuss how they're unhappy, whether it's about the results or whatever it might be. But it's the easiest thing to latch on, which makes sense. So keeping that in mind is very, very important, okay? So now that we understand that that's happening, and why that's happening, that doesn't discredit or credit the feedback. It just notice that, again, the first thing I'm going to do, these are the workouts I'm doing, I'm not getting results, the programming's not good, or whatever it is, right? So now from there, I think it's important to understand that no one has ever complained about a program. No one has complained about anything. It's like if they're getting results and they're aware they're getting results. Hey guys, I don't like your gym. I don't like your program. I don't like you, but I've seen more results than I ever have in my whole life. This is the most effective program I've ever done. I look better naked. I have a better performance, blah, 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 blah. No one's ever said that. So they're unhappy in some way, shape, or form, right? So a member comes up and starts to give feedback on the programming, okay? And I think this is important to understand because there could be a bunch of waves around this. And certainly for us that provide programming to affiliates, I think it is sometimes where that's also another easy place for a member to give feedback is like, hey, this programming's not good, because you're not necessarily attacking the gym owner, you're attacking the program, which is another easy way to get around some of that feedback and that uncomfortable stuff. It's way harder to approach someone and say, I don't like what you are doing, as opposed to, I don't like this program that we are doing. It's not you, it's this, right? So keeping that in mind too. So it's important to hear that stuff and dive in. Now, oftentimes when it comes down to programming, it comes down to what are people unhappy about? They usually complain about things they know. What I mean by that is, okay, and this is all predicated on, this doesn't discredit anything, but keep in mind that every piece of feedback that you get doesn't necessarily mean that it is going to need for you to completely change the programming, change whatever it might be. Okay. Now it's going to be a little different, right? For other types of feedback, right? Hey guys, your bathrooms aren't clean. We'll go into the bathroom. If they're not clean, then that's a problem. Now, if it's an anomaly, let it just be that, right? Be like, well, clean it, move on with it. But with things like this, oftentimes it is a little more intricate. It is a little more complex, and very often, and it's one of those things that people often forget. It's like, we know what we're doing. We're relatively competent and experienced. And I think sometimes that often is forgotten. And what I mean by that is, with level of expertise comes a level of misunderstanding for those that don't have that. So we as coaches need to bridge that gap a little bit. And that's really what comes down to in this discussion on programming when someone delivers feedback, is understanding that action. How can we, because oftentimes the feedback, if you properly describe what, if someone gives you feedback and you properly have a conversation, usually they're satisfied if you can explain to them what's actually happening, as opposed to what they actually think is happening. So, athlete comes up to you and says, hey, I'd like to do more of this, or I don't like the workouts. And we get this feedback because we're very traditional, which is, we don't do strength and metcon. I'd like to do more in an hour. I want to do more, right? And so we don't necessarily program strength and metcon like we don't do like 5x5 back squat followed by 40, 30, 20, 10 toe to bar and burpee broad jump. We just don't necessarily do that regularly. So with that said, when we get that feedback, how do we dive into it? So I think a few things. One, understanding the actual implementation of the class. So something we believe in wholeheartedly, and this is a CrossFit really training methodology belief, is that what we do within the hour is way more than just the class. And so this is how us on coaches and affiliate owners need to understand, how do we present it? So we have a warm-up, we have a skill session, and if there's some type of load, i.e. above your body weight, you have to warm up to that weight. So there's a loading phase. And then from there, you have a workout, then you have a cool down, and then an accessory work, stretching, complementary work, okay? And that's in an hour, okay? So what can help in the beginning, if your athletes, if they just see 40, 30, 20, 10, toe to bar, burpee, broad jump, then they're going to be like, oh, that's it? That's the only workout. All I'm doing is working out for 15 minutes, 20 minutes max. Shorter workouts, Amanda, 975, muscle ups and full snatches, 10 minutes. So to the uneducated, yes. And so if you look at that, well, I'm not doing a lot in the hour. But then if you look at the warm-up, the skill session, if there's a loading phase, loading, and then you have stretching, you also have your accessory work. Imagine if you wrote all of that down on your website for everyone to see. It would almost be overwhelming to the point of like, that's way too much, okay? So that's one end of the spectrum. So from what we're doing and how much we're doing, that's something that it's really important to get them to understand. Now, how you can start to do that is maybe by putting up the general warm-up every day, or even if it's a loading phase, right? So for Amanda, for example, we have a full squat snatch at 135. So you're probably going to have at least 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes in that lesson plan to load up to and to get to that working weight, to not only practice, but also get to that weight. But also there's a huge ability to cater to the spectrum of athletes. And this is how we decide to put strength into our workouts as well. We believe that the more educated and appropriate way to do strength and metcon is, one, not every day, but two, on the days where there's a barbell, you can utilize the same movement, but also cater to a mixed ability. Because for Amanda, it's the squat snatch. So if you can do 10 minutes of building up, a lot of your athletes that are newer, novice, struggle with the movement, which many do, have an opportunity to get a lot of reps at submaximal weight, even at their game weight, which might be relatively light relative to their ability. They can get bunch of practice reps, right? You can even have them do 3 or 4 reps on the minute for 10 minutes, getting 30 to 40 reps. Now, for your veterans, your advanced athletes, your fire breathers, they can build up to that 135 or 95 much faster. And then from there, you can either let them work on cycling repetitions, which is a skill, right? And also absolutely going to get them stronger, work on the eccentric phase of the movement, or they can build up in weight above that weight that they're going to see. So maybe they get to 185 or 205 or whatever it might be, but they're able to go above and then back off a little bit before the workout starts. A little super compensation. So that's a really nice and fun way to play with that. And that's how we like to dose that in. So if you're evaluating the program from a perspective of, well, we only do 1 workout a day, well, yeah, that's all you're going to see for Tuesday, but you're doing a lot more, right? You're going to get a lot more reps in, touches in, practice. Right? And then from there, you also have your accessory work and your stretching, which arguably could be more important depending on where we're at, right? Cooling down, stretching, getting your body back down to a homeostasis so you're recovered, right? And then there's the accessory work, which is low intensity work, which is fun, but also important because we don't often see that within metabolic conditioning workouts. So doing some low intensity, skill work can also be the building blocks for other types of development, whether it's gymnastic strength or some weightlifting stuff or some accessory work for the midline. All important, but in a different setting. So there's a lot of opportunity there. So now from there, it's like, well, I want to get stronger. I want to lift more. You'll hear that a lot. Well, right. And that shows just a misunderstanding of how, 1, you get stronger, right? And 2, I get that. And if that's what you want, that's not hard, right? You can just follow a lifting program, which we offer, right? And you're probably not going to get overall fitter. You'll get a little stronger, but other things will suffer, right? But as opposed to truly understanding that, hey, we're going to get stronger by doing all sorts of things, but also how well do you move, right? You need to earn your volume, and that's why you need to have classes where they're set up for you to teach, see, and correct, right? So if you're unhappy with your progress, so that's usually why they're coming there, right? And they might say that right off the bat or just complain about something, but you boil it down, hey, I want to get better. Well, what do you want to get better at? I want this, or that. Very often, well, we have some specific goals. Oh, great. Well, let's look at these other factors as well. How often are you coming? What workouts have you come to? What workouts have you skipped? Awesome. Now, then from there, we can talk about nutrition, recovery, all these other things that do go into play. But then let's put the onus on us as affiliate owners and trainers and coaches where, all right, well, are we varying the scaling options? Are we pushing them? Are we challenging them? Or are we letting them just move like a soup sandwich, not seeing or correcting and not really pushing them? So yeah, they're not getting better because they're not moving that well, so their ceiling's low. It's not about doing more. They actually need to do less better, which is a hard pill to swallow, right? So you need to get through to them is that understand mechanics are, right? So maybe some of it is our fault if we haven't properly coached them. Okay, and if their goal is really to get X better, right? Now, but there's all these factors that come into play beyond just the programming. In fact, the programming is a very small aspect of it. The implementation of that's probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest. But then you have all the other factors: consistency, nutrition, so on and so forth, quality of movement, which is kind of goes into implementation of the programming, how they're scaled. Okay. And also breaking down, making sure that the programming has proper assessment tools, right? So, for example, we did Amanda this week, okay? And the amount of people that PR'd their Amanda time or PR'd their snatch, right? We haven't snatched in a while, and it's just been unique where, from a programming perspective, because we've been out of gyms, in gyms, no barbells, no rigs, so a lot of funky stuff and a lot of not touching certain movements like a barbell or rings in a while. But we see people PRing, okay? And highlighting that too. So 1, making sure you're tracking your benchmarks and highlighting, well, hey, not every day is a PR day. Not every day is a day where you're going to get actually, better. You might actually take one step back once in a while, depending on where we're at in life. It's a low trajectory to a distant horizon called fitness, right? But also seeing that, hey, we're seeing across the board, a lot of people here are getting stronger that are just following the program. Utilizing that empirical evidence is important. Are we staying relatively injury-free as a gym? And are people getting better and also getting better at skills? Because it's just not lifting more. It's also, are we getting more people strict pull-ups or upside down? Any other skills are they happening too? So those are things to highlight. And this is all in your discussion when we have this discussion. But then also looking back, certainly for like this lifting piece, it's like, all right, well, when are we going heavy? Can you go heavy in non-conventional ways, right? So, for example, again, pre or post workout, are we letting them build up to a heavy X, Y, or Z of that movement? Okay. And showing them, well, yeah, and maybe what's happening is that, you're not properly warming up. So as a coach, put a little onus on you. You can't allow that to happen. If the workout's at, 185 and you go and the athlete does a 95 pound clean and then goes right to 185, well, maybe that's one, not a smart warm up, but two, not a way to get those reps in practice. So we need to demand that our athletes are following protocol through the class, warming up correctly, one, to keep them safe, but also there's some volume and touches in there that will absolutely get better, okay? And get you better, get you stronger, get you moving better, but also making sure that you're prepared for the workout so that first round doesn't feel so awful, so heavy, and you get out of it, right? So there's that concept too, is that are we implementing the warm-ups and preloading phases there, right? And you also don't need to have this notion of, I need to do strength and Metcon every single day in order to get heavy, and I think that's one of those things where I looked at this month of programming and it's like, gosh, we saw, as much as, over 2.5 times a week we're lifting heavy in the month of August, but there's no shortage of metabolic conditioning workouts either. Now, if you're open 7 days a week, it makes it a little easier than if you're 6 or 5. And that's another thing, looking at their logbook and their consistency of when they're coming. So depending on the program that you follow, there shouldn't be some type of repetition from weightlifting Wednesdays or Metcon Mondays, because what if they only come Mondays, and they miss Wednesdays, something like that. Benchmark Friday, so on and so forth. Okay. So again, handling this feedback is important because what does it do for us? What should it do for you? One, and this is why I love the gyms that we work with. They'll get these questions or feedback and they'll ask us, hey, how do we handle this? Right? And then from there, we'll assist. And what we'll always will do is look back and assess. Okay. Look back and assess, well, how do we assess better? How do we highlight this better? And a lot of this is just education from us to others. Is okay, all right, well, this is happening. But if our members are not aware of it, how do we make that more clear? I.e., how do we make it more clear on the days that, hey, it's a metabolic conditioning workout, but we're going to be lifting heavy this day, before or after the workout? So it's not a lifting and heavy day, but yeah, it's a strength and Metcon, right? But we also just might have, deadlift, right? 5 sets of 7 or something like that, right? And then when you look at those days, right, what is going to be the accessory work, right? What does that look like? Do we have some opportunity to do some fun things that we haven't necessarily been able to do? And those are the things that really, certainly on the heavy days where people, I just don't want to lift heavy, but then you do lift heavy and you do some of the accessory work, that's a pretty full day, right? And that's important because then we just might see some intervals or whatever it might be, okay? So a truly varied program is going to be on paper very difficult for those without scope to understand, even for those that say, hey, we haven't done X movement in a while. Well, have we seen it? But maybe in the pre or the post or the warm-ups, there's a lot of evaluation that goes into play. Also, as a programmer, myself or other programmers out there listening, there also might be stylistic choices that might not jive with people. It's like, hey, we haven't seen X movement in a while or done X movement in a while, right? And maybe that's calculated. Maybe that's part of the variance that we're looking for. It's not the end of the world, right? Because remember, these movements have carryover from one to another. So if you haven't done something in a while, most likely you're garnering some sort of tangential capacity by doing other things as well. Keeping in mind, too, is what are your goals? Asking these athletes, hey, what are your goals, right? Why are you here? Most people want to look better naked, have more competency and functionality through life and what they're doing and how they're doing it. They want to look good and feel good and perform good, but do they truly care about their 1 rep max snatch or deadlift or clean and jerk? Probably not, right? Because if that's all you care about, maybe as a coach, maybe they're that one-off person that needs a specific program, but very rarely is that the case. And go off empirically, it's like, hey, this stuff works. We've seen it at our gyms for 10 years with 10-year members, and they get better, they get fitter, they get faster, they get stronger. But that doesn't mean we constantly evaluate, doesn't mean we constantly try to find areas of improvement. So feedback should elicit action. action to communicate, action to look at yourself. Can we get better? But it doesn't necessarily mean change. It doesn't necessarily mean, hey, we're doing this because of this feedback, because that might not be appropriate. Sometimes it's just a misunderstanding, a misinterpretation, but there's validity because they feel a certain way. We need to communicate with that person. Now, it's not okay if they're demanding something and change right away, because that's like, hey, if you want a different program, then maybe you're at the wrong gym, right? Or you're just doing the wrong program. I can program for you some lifting, and that's all you want to do, or just this or just that. That's just going to be something different. It's like going to a restaurant, complaining about food they don't have, but that's the restaurant you chose to go to. Why would you complain about that, right? Now, right, from there, it's like, yeah, you can change the menu sometimes, right? Tweak it based off what you want, but you can't ask for something completely different that's not on there. Remember that too, and that's okay. Very rarely, I think, is that the case once you have a proper discussion with people. It comes down to results. People want to get better. How do we help them in that journey and having that discussion with them? And, the cool thing about CrossFit is so much open source knowledge out there. Oftentimes people, and it's weird, like sometimes the inmates rule the asylum a lot at CrossFit gyms. So remember, you're the coach and you have the expertise, or you have the people in your corner that have the expertise. So it's okay to say, hey, like, yeah, I hear you, but, and there's some good stuff in there. I like that. We're actually going to listen to that, but let's talk about these other things. And I would often come to say here, most people need to move better. They don't need more. They need to actually just move a little better, practice a little more. They need to work out with a little higher intensity, right? Because intensity yields the results. More doesn't necessarily mean better. Now, because again, I just look at the programming that we program. What I do is that it's not about how much, it's how you do it, and really highlighting that to them. And that is on us as coaches to transmit that culture to them. So hopefully this helps for you guys. If you have questions, let me know. But this could be a much longer discussion. But and maybe we'll continue this in a little bit of a series. But let me know if this is helpful. I just want to provide resources for you coaches and affiliate owners that get this type of feedback, because it's very common. Because it's also okay to have two different programs. But again, why would one program be better than the others? Well, I don't know if one program is better than the others, but one is always learning and evolving and growing. But also, it's like, for us, it's being consistent to true CrossFit methodology, which we know is always feedback-driven and results-driven. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. And we've been living it and doing it for much longer than most, and we're getting older, right? So we're learning that as well. So again, there's a lot of things there. So sometimes it's like, hey, just like trust that we kind of know what we're doing, and this is what we'd have you do. Now, if you don't want to do that, that's going to be a different story. But sometimes it's like, hey, like, I'm going to listen to the vet. I'm going to listen. Doesn't mean don't challenge. I love the contrarian mindset. We should always be evolving and growing too. Doesn't mean it's the only way. But experience and skill and knowledge should amount to something. But always be open to feedback. All right, gang. Hopefully it was helpful on the soapbox. Feedback. Appreciate you. See you on the other side.